Hey there, welcome to the Underground Sessions podcast, where we have courageous conversations at the intersection of faith, culture, and politics, all with a biblical worldview in mind. We're so glad you're joining us today. My name is Bob Erbig. I'll be your host. I'm joined today by Hock Ng, who's got a background with Bell Labs, semiconductors, and multimedia research, and has a vested interest in artificial intelligence. I think you'll really enjoy this interview. Also, as a reminder, we're doing an event based on this on November the 4th. Go to our website, www.millingtonbaptist.org, to sign up. All these interviews that are coming down the pike are going to be related to this topic, and so I hope that you join us. Hit the subscribe button, and now enjoy my interview with Hock. So, wow. Glad to have you here on the podcast today, Hock. AI. Man, that's something everybody's been talking about in the last 6 months. And, I've been following this for a few years. I'm sure you have too. You work in the field. A couple years ago, I picked up this book. Did I mention this book to you, The Big Nine?
No.
Big Nine. So this woman, Amy Webb, she is I think I heard her introduce herself as a quantitative futurist.
Okay.
Did you even know that was like a field?
Nope.
Apparently. So she basically comes up with these predictive models of where things are going to go in the future, and then does the best she can to figure out where life is going to be, and then she advises companies based on that.
Right.
I'd have to go back and look. She had basically a really good scenario, and then a really bad scenario, and then a medium scenario for all of things that were coming down related to AI. But the book really goes through what she calls the big 9 companies. So 3 are in China, 6 are in the U.S., and these are things like Facebook, Amazon, Google, and others, Microsoft, and talks about their development of AI and where that's going. Now, this was, I would say, 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago. So things have made a big difference since then.
Right.
And now, I think the tagline Mark put for the event we're having on November 4th is "What was once science fiction is now part of everyday life." but yeah, in the last 6 months, I think it's on top of mind for everybody. So maybe I would ask you the question. When most people think about AI, there's probably a picture in their mind. What do you think people are thinking of when we say artificial intelligence?
I would say probably robots. Robots taking over the world.
The iRobot, the Terminator, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Is that still part of your, when you talk with people, that's what they think?
Sometimes it really depends on where they're coming from and how much exposure they have to technology.
Yeah.
But the folks I speak to, a lot of them are in tech, so they're more aware of just the more practical uses of AI rather than something that's futuristic. What we see in the movies.
Yeah. Now I imagine we'll get into this a little bit later in our conversation here, but one of the things that she makes the point of saying in this book that was helpful for me a number of years ago was it's not going to be this robot thing, although maybe there will be robots.
Right.
Like you'll have assistants like on the Jetsons back in the day, Rose the maid who was a robot, and others.
Right.
But it's more about things like Amazon will. The word she used was nudge. So when you go and you do a search on Amazon and you decide to pick a book or you make a post on Facebook, the algorithms then will nudge you in a certain direction to optimize what you like. And the point that she made in the book is that, especially when it comes to social media, then you're only interacting with people that basically agree with you, and you're not seeing posts of things that disagree with you. You're not getting recommendations for books that aren't in your interest sphere.
Right.
And her argument was that that's going to make the world a worse place with less discourse. But that's basically how AI is kind of working. It's learning things and then it's optimizing stuff for you. At least in that case. And I think things have changed a bit since then. So the question then is, what is artificial intelligence? Is that a new concept? How far back does this go? Is it really something that happened with ChatGPT, which we can get into later on?
Well, as an academic field, it started somewhere around the 50s.
Okay, so officially in the 50s.
It's a formal academic field, but you can go back into time. There's always people imagining, about automating things. And so, there's probably fiction that's being written about, a machine that can think like a human even
Right,
before
right.
that, right? So, I mean, in the early days, we have things like computers that play chess,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if you remember this, but early in the day, there was a program called Eliza that you could talk to.
I don't remember Eliza, but that would be fun.
I think it was on Apple II. You had Eliza was a text-based program that you could chat with it, like it's a
Okay.
psychotherapist, and it would give you responses.
Yeah.
But of course, that was very primitive form of something simulated as if it were a human giving responses
Yeah.
to you.
Well, yeah, and certainly, again, like science fiction shows, whether
Mhm.
it was a Star Trek or
Right.
Star Wars or whatever, there was robots that were interacting with you. Maybe more recently, there was, I think, a movie with Joaquin Phoenix called Her, where basically he develops a relationship with
Mhm.
a computer interface that is almost like a companion for
Mhm.
him, which isn't so far off now
Right.
in terms of where things are going.
Right.
What's your view on? I know people have. I've heard people even say things like the braking system on your car
Mhm.
is a form of artificial intelligence because it's I guess programmed to do something that then it accomplishes. And I've heard people categorize things in the way of saying, well, this is the two categories I've heard are strong AI and weak AI,
Mhm.
or other people will talk about artificial narrow intelligence, artificial general intelligence, artificial super intelligence.
Mhm.
Have you heard those categories? Are they helpful?
Yeah.
Or are there other ones that are better?
I mean, general artificial intelligence would be something that would behave almost as a human, have sentience. Whereas currently today, most of the AI is, as what you said, is narrow AI. It's very specific towards a type of application, right? Whether it's understanding images, understanding audio, and so on.
Yeah, and people have programmed it to do a specific thing. It's not
Right.
necessarily learning and evolving, so to
Right.
speak.
So there could be a distinction between just programming something to carry out a certain task versus a program that actually can learn from the data that it has access to. And so we can talk about that. That's more of machine learning, where it's the computer based on the data that you feed to it, is able to then make predictions on
Yeah.
new
Yeah,
data.
so why don't we talk about that? Because I think there's a lot of terms that people maybe have heard out there in the ether that they don't quite know. And honestly, I will say I've heard a lot of terms, and I'm not sure how to define them all. So one of them, which you just mentioned, is machine learning, large language models, generative AI. I'm sure there's a bunch of others.
Right.
What are the if somebody were to understand what's going on with artificial intelligence now? What are the terms that the basic terms they should understand?
Yeah, so I would say that machine learning is a subset of the general field of artificial intelligence. So machine learning then has its different subgroups within it. So as you mentioned, large language models.
So that's a piece of machine learning.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So large language models became popular in general culture because of ChatGPT, which is based on a large language model.
Okay.
Right. But machine learning has many different areas within it. So something as simple as statistical prediction of, let's say, a pricing of a house in a certain area, that is also part of machine learning, but that's not using large language models. So
what would it be learning? It's something different.
it's learning based on the data that it has access to. So let's say housing prediction of housing prices would be a good example. So if you feed the algorithm a whole bunch of data about the housing market in a certain area, so you have, let's say, in a certain county in the state, you have houses with X number of rooms, a certain square footage, garage, number of bathrooms, and so on. And based on historical house prices. That algorithm then can predict, given a certain type of house, what would it be its market value. So that's something that if you ever gone on Zillow,
it uses that
in the back end, Zillow has a machine learning algorithm that predicts what would be.
But that's different than a large language model.
Right. Large language models are typically for what they call natural language type applications.
So if I want to act like I'm talking to the machine,
Right.
it would be using a large language model.
Yeah, things that involve words and language would be using large language models.
Yeah, so if I put into ChatGPT, how are you doing today? It will respond to me.
Right. So like
some way, shape, or form.
Chatbots, a lot of chatbots today would be using large language
Which is something we see a lot. If you go on a lot of people's websites now, there's a chatbot that pops up and says, "How can I help you?" You know, what can I? And you know, good. Yeah. All right. What other terms should we know about?
I think primarily, you have the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning. You mentioned large language models. Then generative AI is something we haven't talked about yet.
Is that the thing that's used more in like an artistic field? You say create something like this and it will generate, or is that different?
In some senses, yes, it covers that as well. But generative AI could also cover just the natural language applications. So even a chatbot is part of generative AI because it's generating what would be the word that will come next.
Okay.
So you can use generative AI in just language. You can use it for generating audio, music, images, videos. So there's a whole range of applications for generative AI.
So where would people nowadays see that in their everyday life? Just the chatbot feature, or is there other examples of where they would see that?
One area that's gaining a lot of popularity is in terms of generating text. So, for example, there are many applications on different websites now that allow you to create. Let's say you want to create copy for a certain product. You could tell the program, describe what your product is, and say, I want to generate marketing copy for my product. So if you're launching a new book on a certain topic, you could say, act as if you are a marketing expert and generate for me the creative copy for promoting my book. So it would then, write out the script for what you would have to use.
Yeah. I had a friend tell me, it was a couple months ago, they were using whatever the new and maybe it was the new ChatGPT thing. They use it to make a resume or put a job posting out there. Right. And you can start to see where that may be really helpful in terms of saving time on more quote-unquote menial tasks that people might have to spend a couple hours on.
Right.
Now the AI can do it in about 30 seconds, right? Yeah. So that's... You still have to go back and edit it, though, because...
Right.
I sent you the. Did you get to listen to any part of that podcast I sent you the other day about the?
No, I haven't had a chance.
So so let me. So basically, this guy was talking about investing in AI, but one of the points that he made at in the middle of the interview was to say that large language models they are helpful, but they aren't always right in the answers they give you. So he used the example of a more complex math problem. So let's say I put in what is what's 2 plus 2?
Right.
Well, it got that right. But then he put in what's 739 times 12 divided by 6. And he said I kept putting that in different ones that were features of that, and it never got it right. Because the way that it figures things out it's not really doing the math.
Correct.
It's looking for patterns out there somewhere on the internet. And if you're putting in something that's not as common, it's not going to get it right.
Yeah, and that's a term called hallucination, which
so the machines can hallucinate.
Right. Which is a term you'll see often in terms of when people talk about tools like ChatGPT. So hallucination is simply the algorithm giving you information that's not factually correct, or sometimes not even physically possible. Let's say. So you brought a good example. So something I did the other day was I was testing out this new feature that ChatGPT has, which is you can upload an image to it, ask it to describe the image, and tell you what it is. So I had taken this image that was an aerial shot of a parking lot with cars, and I asked it, tell me, or count the number of cars in this image. And then I compared it with manually counting it, and it never got it right. So there were.
So that's interesting. So why is that? It wasn't looking at it and counting. It was looking for a pattern of some kind, or
in the background, it's running. It's creating a program to be able to understand the image, and part of understanding the image is it has to extract what it thinks is a car and be able to segment out cars in that image. So there's a step of segmentation, which is, that's given the image, I think that this is one car, this is two, and so on, and then it counts the number of segments in that image. So depending on the sophistication of the algorithm that it has access to run, it may not be able to do that. So there is technology that can do it much more accurately today, but it's just not something that's integrated into some of the tools the commercial tools that we have access to.
Is that why when I go to log into certain websites, they make me look at images and say, which boxes have a street sign?
Right. So it's interesting.
Because the computer can't figure it out, right?
Interesting you brought that up, because that was a way for some of the companies to get training data that's being fed back by a human. So if I have access to all these images, I want to tell which one's a car or a bicycle or a bridge. I use it as part of that verification process, which actually serves the double purpose of you giving me actual human feedback into what a human thinks
dual purpose
is actually a bicycle versus not a bicycle. So if I use that,
so my answers can be used against me at some point in the future.
No, they use it to train then the algorithms, because people are doing this millions of times a day. That means that you have so much data that you're able to train on.
Sure, that's good. Yeah. All right, so why don't we move into just for the average listener out there, everyday life. And we started to talk about this a little bit, but what are other examples? If you were the average person out there now, where are you interacting with AI in everyday life, and how do you see it changing everyday life? I mean, in your opinion.
Yeah, one example that is very common is voice assistants. So every time you talk to Siri or Google Voice, that's some kind of machine learning algorithm in the back end.
I called up somebody the other day, and Google answered and said, hold on a second, let me see if he's available.
Right.
I said, okay.
Yeah, that's one area. So every time you talk to Siri, in the background, it's running an algorithm to be able to, understand what you're saying. Another very common area is every time you turn on Netflix and it's recommending shows to you, that's also a machine learning algorithm in the back end, looking at your previous, the previous shows you watched, and
you might like this because you watch this, right?
Exactly. Or Amazon recommendation, like based on your previous shopping behavior, they think that you like a certain type of product. And social media, right? If you go on Instagram, you go on Facebook, it highlights certain types of posts or news stories based on what it thinks a person with your profile and your set of friends would like.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, those are some good examples. I've heard people talk about how AI is just going to kind of upend the economy to some extent. Like people are going to lose jobs, and not in what we thought. Where do you see, or I should say, what industries do you see being most affected by that? Because that's somebody watching here today may say, well, AI is coming in and it's going to affect my work, and probably you're already seeing it affect your work because it's changing the type of job you're being asked to do.
Right.
So education. I mean, right now we talked about this on one of our recent Behind the Pulpit podcasts. The big strike out in Hollywood.
Right.
Part of that was, we don't want you to be able to use AI in art creation. Like Tom Hanks says, in the future you may see me in movies, but it's not going to be me. It's going to be an image of me that was created through AI.
Right.
Yes. So what industries do you think will be most affected by this?
I think a lot of the industries that require jobs that can be performed following a set of directions or a set of rules will be most impacted. And you can kind of see what's happening now and extrapolate that to the future. So, we have self-driving cars as a good example. So in the future, you could envision that, truck drivers may be put out of work, or school bus drivers, right? And if you think about it, what is it that makes driving a truck replicable by AI? It's because it has a set of rules. I want to get from point A to point B, and to get from here to there, I need to follow a certain route. And even driving on the highway, you follow a certain set of rules. And once you can automate that or use a machine to replicate some of those rules, then those types of things could possibly be impacted.
Wasn't the thing that's holding up the self-driving cars is more about who's liable if there's
Yeah.
if it makes a mistake. If the car winds up
Right.
crashing and the algorithm fails and
Yeah.
somebody dies, who's responsible?
Right.
You're not going to sue the computer, are you?
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. That's the legal implications
Right,
of,
right.
of something like that.
But I've generally heard, though, I mean, what you're getting at is fields like nursing are probably not going to get replaced by robots. Although I think people are working on like companion bots
Right,
to be there for people at some point, but not full on,
Right.
not full on nursing. And anything that requires more critical thinking skills is probably not something that's going to be replaced by a robot.
And I think we shouldn't focus on the aspect of replacement, which is a lot of, which is generating a lot of fear about all this AI and algorithms going to replace my job. But we should be thinking about it as in terms of augmentation. Like, how can it help me do my job better?
Yes.
Right. Than
Or
what
it
I can
frees
do.
you up to do other things that you weren't able to do
Exactly.
if you had to.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's aspects, I'm sure, of any job
Right.
where you say, I just have to do that. I don't
Right.
really enjoy that, and if
Right.
I could offload that to somebody else, that would be great.
Yeah.
So that I can focus on the things I really want to do.
Right. Right.
I know at least in the artistic field, there was a lot of conversations on will AI be able to create things like art and poetry and things like that, which it seems to be able to do. Although you put it and you say, could you create a poem in the style of
Right.
Blake or whatever, and it'll search and it'll find that and
Right.
it'll make something.
Right.
I've had people suggest to me, you could just ask it to write a sermon for you, which. Yes, it could do that. That still doesn't feel right to me, but it could do things like that.
Yeah. So basically, what it's good at is imitation, and also, let's say, putting things together, mixing and matching different things.
Right.
Right. So, if you think about it, can AI create a Tolkien and produce work like Tolkien did?
Right.
Probably not. Right.
Or it certainly can't do it without Tolkien himself, right?
Right.
Because it has to look at what Tolkien did.
Right. So it can look at his whole body of work and say, okay, this is his style, and these are the type of characters and just descriptions, and give you something similar. Or you could say, I want to mix and match, Tolkien and Shakespeare, whatever that would
Right, and
give
make
you.
a novel.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But it's not going to be able to create something totally new. I'm not sure if that's the best way to put it, but it can only know or learn as much as the information it has access to.
Right. So, are you of the mindset? Do you think at some point there's going to be this conscience robot, like this idea, this super intelligence is going to be able to basically be capable of human functions? It's not going to need somebody to program stuff in there. I mean, that's sort of I've heard people say that's never going to happen, to some people say that's within the next 10 years.
Yeah.
It just seems like disparate opinions on when that might come to pass or not come to pass.
Yeah, I mean, whether something has conscience is debatable depending on how you define it. So, but I think the danger is that you could leave machines, you could automate things and leave it to the machines and algorithms to run, and the fear is, what happens when, it goes beyond the bounds of where you expect that, it would normally behave. So, let's say self-driving would be a good example, right? You can train it as much as you want, but there are always going to be situations where the machine has never encountered such a, environment before. And then how will it be able to react?
So you might expect it to go from Los Angeles to New York, and somehow it winds up in Canada somewhere because of whatever happened on I-66.
Right. Or let's say you're at an intersection and it's a self-driving car, and there is a dog crossing the street and on one side and a person on the other side, and the car cannot stop in time. What decision is it going to make?
Yeah, so it's got to decide between the car and the human,
dog. Right?
And it doesn't know what to do.
Right. It has to decide between what is the value of a dog versus human. Let's say.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about some theology here. Do you think that the current forms of AI will change the way, and let's not even talk about Christians, let's just say society at large, the way they view humanity and answering the question, what does it mean to be human?
Yeah.
I mean, I see a lot of people in the tech field talking about how this is like a new form of humanity. We can somehow embed our consciences in computers. I mean, that's even been played out in some movies. The whole transhumanism movement.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have thoughts on any of that?
Some of it. You touched on this before when you said that one of the things it could do is that it could free us up to have more time. And you think about it, even today, what are the things that frees up our time, right? You have a washing machine and a dryer at home, a dishwasher. All those things are technologies that free up your time. And then you could argue the same for AI. A lot of things that we can automate or have AI help us can free up our time. So then the question would be, what do you do with your time? Right? Do you want to spend your time on, leisure activities, or and which leads to the question of why am I here and what's the purpose of my life, right? Am I here to just maximize the enjoyment of my life, or am I here for a bigger purpose?
Yeah, and that's something that AI probably can't answer for us. Certainly we would think that if you're a Christian and you're created in the image of God, in Genesis 1, what does that mean, right? Can a machine be made in the image of God? I would say no.
Right.
That we bear something unique as image bearers and representatives of God, and so it's it is worthy of us to think through what does it mean to be that, to image God in the world, and to view machines as like you said, a tool to help us better bear the image of God. I don't know if that's a fair way of saying it, but like if Chris Dowden was here, shout out to Chris, he'll be on the panel for the actual event. The illustration he gave me is, so ChatGPT, and you said this before, is not going to replace me as a computer programmer, but I'm a better computer programmer with ChatGPT on my side, assisting me and helping me. So it can, I think the word you used was augment.
Goes back
life.
to augmentation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you started to get into this idea of work, and this all, I mean, it does take us back to, in Genesis, created in the image of God, we're put in the garden to do work, and work is a good thing. And I think that's one of the things that people are thinking, just practically speaking. If my job is not augmented, but it's totally replaced, so to speak. So using the illustration of the truck driver,
Right.
What do I do for work?
Right.
And it's painful when you lose that because I think we were made to work.
Right. Exactly. And I think that work is the nature of work changes all the time, right? You have like when you went from horse and carriage to the automobile, then you instead of having people driving the carriages, you have people driving buses and trains and things like that.
Right.
So, if you look at it, the work of a software programmer didn't exist many years ago, and now it's common. And it's going to be the same with AI, right? The type of work you do is going to change. The nature of work is going to change. So it's more of a matter of being able to retrain and adapt to the environment than trying to stick to, the way of doing things in the past.
Right. So yeah, the adaptation for the stuff that's coming down the road.
But I think the work will always be there, and we can talk about meaningful work in a different conversation.
Sure. So if you had to give a biblical view of AI, could you do that? Is there such a thing as a biblical view of AI?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I think that one of the things that I thought about as I was driving over is another instance in Genesis, the Tower of Babel. Right.
Sure.
So if you think
that didn't turn out so good, huh?
If you think about what were the intentions of people when they built this tower and gathered everyone, to have a common language. Some of those things you can draw parallels to in with AI, right? This whole utopian dream that humanity can create things that create almost like a utopia for human beings, and we know that that's just not going to happen because of
human sinfulness, and at some level we're gonna mess it up.
Right. But but there are good things. Like AI is making it easier for people to understand different languages. You could could ask it to translate a certain piece of text into a different language, and it can do that.
Yeah.
But there's always this danger of like, what's the ultimate purpose of you creating this technology, and who ultimately gets glorified with it.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Let me take it in a different direction on the theological question. So I heard I don't know if you're familiar with John Lennox. He's a apologist in the UK, and I heard him do an interview on this. He also wrote a book called 2084, which was focused on the artificial intelligence question. But one of the things I heard him do in this interview was basically say or speculate that in the future AI might be the Antichrist. And his reasoning for that was that it could be really good at deception, which is what you see the Antichrist doing in the book of Revelation. And I think about things like the Deepfake stuff on the internet now, where now you could take our images, our voices, and make a video that's not us.
Right.
People are talking about AI and election interference or destabilization of the globe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was an interesting concept. I'm not totally sure what I think about that, but I guess that is part of the theological realm in terms of how we interact and what we should be using AI for.
Yeah. I guess it gets more into the ethical issues in AI. So just like anything else that's a tool, AI is a tool that can be used for good purposes or bad purposes, right?
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, there was a guy, I think he was from Microsoft. It might have been Steve Ballmer. I forget the name. Wrote a book called Tools and Weapons, and it was all about the AI stuff.
Right.
So it could be a tool, could also be a weapon, as with a lot of different things. And thinking ethically about how we use it is good.
Yeah.
So maybe for the last section, thinking about applications, we did this. I did this on a retreat recently. This topic came up. And we were talking about brainstorming the benefits of AI, the dangers of AI, and then the questions we should be asking ourselves as we're interacting with them. So I thought maybe we could do a lightning round here at the end and start with what are the benefits you see right now of AI
Yeah, the benefits.
that people should be aware
Right.
of?
In terms of learning, definitely it's beneficial because because it's trained on all the information that's available on the internet. It can get relevant information for you at a faster pace.
Faster than Google itself.
More, I would say, more relevant.
Okay.
Maybe not faster, but more relevant.
So rather than doing a Google search, I type the same question into ChatGPT, and it's going to be more helpful than if I go on Google.
If you go on Google, it doesn't really, let's say, compose the answer for you. It just gives you the links that it thinks are relevant, and you have to still
I have to do more work with
go
Google.
to those links and read through the articles and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So for instance, if you take an application, let's say you want to understand a certain passage in the Bible, right? You could ask it, tell me more about, John chapter 3, for example. And it could, if it had access to, let's say, commentaries that are available online, then it could, compose that answer in a form that's, a lot more meaningful than just a bunch of links for you to go and check out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the dangers of it, do you see, that we should be aware of?
Like you mentioned, the deepfakes, the false information. With generative AI, you could create all sorts of images that are not real. And so the danger is,
And I can easily do that myself, right? Like there's apps where I can go in right now and create essentially I could create a deep fake of myself.
Yes.
And then put it out there somewhere.
Right. So, you have to be discerning enough to know like what is real and what's not real. And, there are people thinking about these issues and trying to create ways to, counteract all these deep fakes. So
that's just a general part of being in a company now, right?
Right.
You're creating cybersecurity against this stuff.
Right. Yeah. And social media also is a danger because, behind the algorithms are always people, and it's the people who decide, what is good or what is
not good.
What is not good. And so, when the algorithm decides what are the news items that should pop up in your feed, it kind of has the power to influence, right, the things that you see and how you think about events that are taking place in the world.
Yeah, that's one of the issues she in this book I mentioned before she brings up is that there is always a group of people that are programming the machines you're interacting with, and they may not look like you and they may not think like you,
right?
And they might have ulterior motives, like you're bringing up. So we have to be very, very discerning. So what are some of the questions you think people should be asking as they interact with these various artificial intelligence platforms? Just is there a rubric of things I should always ask myself when I go on social media or when I'm doing a search or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think one of the things for us not to forget is, the ability to think critically about what we see, right? Even the way we interact with the tools. We need to be able to kind of understand what's going on behind the scenes for it to, produce the results that it produces.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that people will critique nowadays is that we have a lot of information, but we've lost the ability to really think, the ability and the skill to think critically through all the information that we've been given.
Right.
And that's something maybe we need to recultivate in our day and age.
Right.
I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Good. Well, anything else on the benefits, the dangers, the questions? Any parting comments? Because I think we're coming to about the end of our time here.
Yeah. It's a very rapidly evolving field. So,
and by the time people watch this, things might be completely different.
Right. by the time you watch this, there'll be another 10 different AI tools that enable you to do all different types of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to move and bob and weave with what's coming out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Create
It's exciting, but also intimidating.
Yeah.
And hey, that's the way it is.
Exactly.
All right, Hock. Well, thanks for coming on and giving us the basics. Hopefully, this was helpful to you. As a reminder, there is an event on November the 4th, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. You'll be seeing this episode before that. Go and sign up online, millingtonbaptist.org. We're going to be having more conversations about this, as well as having some creative interaction with AI at that event. So we hope to see you there. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to be putting out more of these podcasts as it relates to the undergrad studies.